All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. Great to be here. And let me get rid of that off my screen, and we will be all set. Um, and the only person I can see right now is Jill. Not that that's a bad thing, but she's the only person I can see. I'll go. There we go. Now we've got the whole gallery. I've got this figured out after 21 months. Great to see everybody. It's been a busy day already here. Just back from Loyalist College, where we made a very important announcement that you'll hear more about tomorrow on the local news. And I just caught the end of what Marg was talking about, and it kind of addresses some of Marg's concerns and making sure that we have all of the health human resources that we have, not just for long-term care facilities and hospitals, but also for home care. So it's a really important announcement, and was really pleased to be there with Minister Jill Dunlop just a few minutes ago, actually, who's our Minister of Colleges and Universities, tackling another one of the very important issues that we're all dealing with in the local community. So really pleased to be able to spend some time with you. I'll just do a brief introduction before we start to take some questions, and I can hear concerns directly from all of you, and it's great to see lots of familiar faces here on the line. It's certainly been another extremely difficult year. We can all agree on that. I think it was a little bit better than 2020, but of course the pandemic continues, and we've had lots of programs that we've rolled out through the provincial government, and the federal government has rolled out all kinds of support programs as well to try and help our business community and others weather the storm, to make sure that we can come out of this at the end of the day and have our economy rolling. And as I always like to say, when this thing is finally over, we are going to experience the roaring 2020s. I think the economy is going to take off, and we're going to have a real good time in the economy, and getting back to socializing with each other. But we rolled out a lot of programs, as I mentioned, to ensure that there was support available as we weathered previous waves and health measures over the last year. And thanks to the efforts of our business community and Ontario residents to go out there and get the jab, we have some of the highest vaccination rates in the world. And that's helped businesses across the economy continue to keep their doors open and operate with as much normalcy as we possibly could throughout much of 2021. And we appreciate the efforts of businesses, and particularly our local Ontario Chambers of Commerce and members locally in Bay of Quinte and Prince Edward County, Quinte West, and Belleville. Really appreciate your efforts in keeping your employees and partners and consumers safe. So this isn't over. Unfortunately, even in the past week, the environment's changed again with the Omicron variant. It's now doubling in Ontario every 2.2 days, is what the science table told us yesterday in their presentation. And that science table presentation is going to be made public a little bit later on. So Omicron is doubling every 2.2 days. And so it's already the dominant strain in Ontario. And I know, especially in light of the recent case data locally here in our region, that we're going to be listening for the advice of Dr. Kieran Moore, our Chief Medical Officer of Health. And I just had the opportunity a couple of minutes ago to talk to Dr. Tumache, who's our Medical Officer of Health now in Hastings and Prince Edward counties, just about the risk that Omicron poses for all of us going forward. And I think thus far we've seen that the majority of serious symptomatic infection requiring critical care has come among those who are unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated. But we're going to make a push for boosters in everybody to maintain those protection levels. And you'll learn more when the science table comes out with its report today, just about the efficacy of the first two doses, and how we need to have that booster dose accelerated to make sure that we have the levels of protection that we all want going forward through this latest wave. We've distributed all of the rapid tests. We've distributed all of them. They're all out there. I know the Chambers of Commerce have had them, and you've been sending them out to your members. And we're pushing the federal government for additional tests so that we can increase that screening tool. All of our school kids have them now. And they should have brought them home anyway. I know they were delivered, and so the kids should be using those throughout the holidays, and making sure that should we get back to school after the holiday break, when we get to school after the holiday break, that we can limit the amount of spread in the schools. So we're also looking at ways to help with challenges in the business community right now. One of the things that I've heard loud and clear, and I know you folks have probably heard it as well, and you've probably been talking about it earlier today, is access to labor. And that includes providing $3.5 million in stabilizing funding for Loyalist College to weather the pandemic-related expense and support ongoing skills training programs like Elevate Plus for the manufacturing and food processing sector, and enrichment centers, Inspire Cafe, and second career programs where you can get grants of up to $28,000 to get trained to fill jobs that we know are vacant out there, particularly in the skilled trades. And so there's a lot of investment that's been made there with our skilled trade strategy. And we're also looking at ways to help people fight the cost of inflation. And preemptively, we raised the minimum wage to $15 starting next month, as all of you will know. And rather than waiting for a larger legislated increase based on a projected high CPI come October, it takes out the sting of the larger jump and helps those frontline workers that have worked so hard throughout the pandemic. And we'll also continue to deliver 3 paid sick days to help workers and limit the costs of businesses. And then there's the federal sick days that are available on top of that. So, of course, my ministry is also actively working to keep energy costs flat. For those who don't know, I am now the Minister of Energy. And I've been making my way through all the ministries in the last 3.5 years. As some of you'll know, I was the Minister of Government and Consumer Services and the House Leader when we formed government. Spent some time as the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, which was a fascinating role. Went to Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services and made some historic investments there, particularly for kids with special needs. And now at the Ministry of Energy for the last 6 months or so. So making sure that we're keeping energy costs low and competitive and predictable. And that always hasn't been the case. As some of you will remember, I used to be the critic and used to hammer on electricity prices and the double-digit percentage increases that we were seeing year over year. So, you know, all of these pieces are going to help us stay on a stable footing moving forward, and really looking forward to any questions that you might have, a business or otherwise. And just want to make sure that we're keeping you informed and we're as transparent as we can be on what's happening. And I can clarify anything that you may have concerns about. So all the best over the holiday season, and looking forward to your questions here this afternoon.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us. I know that we had a couple of questions that came out before we started and just as we jumped in. So I'm going to pass it over to Leslie. Maybe because specifically you mentioned the increase in minimum wage and how that has also impacted the restaurant, the server wage. There was a question about that. I'll toss it to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Jill. And thanks, Minister Smith, Minister of Energy, Todd Smith, for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to the business community here in Bay of Quinte. I have more of the details on this particular question, but if you could tell us a bit about the discount on alcohol costs for our hospitality businesses, and how the alcohol costs balance the liquor server wage increase, and what the thought process is there.
Yeah, so this was an announcement that was made yesterday by the Minister of Finance, Peter Bethlen-Falvey. He got out just ahead of the Premier and the big COVID announcements yesterday. So, you know, this is going to help. It's going to help support businesses that are impacted by the pandemic, and it's going to continue to provide choice and consumers for customers as well by cutting LCBO wholesale prices for bars and restaurants. It's also going to enable curbside pickup of beer, wine, and cider from licensed grocery stores. And it's also going to freeze the basic beer tax rate. I see Michael Watterson on here. They're from Kinsip Distillery. It's not yet going to impact exactly what you're looking for, Michael, but I did have the conversation with Minister Bethlen Falvey a couple of days ago prior to this announcement, and it's front of mind because we all understand how important our beverage alcohol sector is here in the Bay of Quinte region, but in large parts of rural Ontario. It's a huge opportunity for economic development. So on this announcement in particular, Leslie, we're supporting the bars and restaurants and other licensed liquor consumption premises and cutting the wholesale price for the alcohol that they purchase from the LCBO. It saves these businesses an effectively 20%. When compared to retail prices. So this is going to provide about $60 million in all is what they're estimating in annual support to restaurants and bars and other businesses, and builds on some of the other recent changes that we've announced in improving alcohol choice and convenience for consumers and creating more opportunities for businesses and also strengthening the social responsibility standards and so it's part of the new modernized legal framework that simplifies the rules for the alcohol sector. So as I mentioned too, we are freezing the basic beer tax that was set to be indexed to inflation in March of next year and until March 1st of 2023, and supporting beer and craft brewers to recover and grow and save consumers money. There's more to come on this, but from what we've heard so far since this was announced, very, very well received by the restaurant sector in particular. It's been a really tough couple of years for them. I think most importantly, probably, although this is a big announcement and a big savings potentially for restaurants and bars and other licensed premises, keeping them open is like the number one thing that we can do. And so if we can ensure that these places are as safe as possible and continuing to be open.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Todd. I think some of the questions and the responses that I've heard from the restaurant hospitality industry in response to this is that with the incredible inflation rates, payroll taxes, and now overall rising costs and then wage increases, I think there's just some concern that this 10% savings is not enough. So I think that's some of the feedback that I would share, some of the concerns from the business owners that I've spoken with.
Yeah, sure, I can appreciate that. It's been a tough time. It's one measure, but again, we're staring down another variant that we want to make sure that those businesses don't have to close down again. The most important thing that we can do, in my opinion, is keep them safe places and ensure that they can remain open. And certainly we're not done, and we realize that we're going to have more challenges. The Ontario Small Business Support Grant went out earlier in 2021, and I hope we don't have to, but we may have to go back to providing a similar type of program should things turn really dark.
Thanks.
And I think that raises a really good question. What is the appetite at Queen's Park right now regarding the numbers? Because a lot of us feel that we were told if our vaccination rate was a certain spot at a certain rate and at a certain level, and I realize the booster piece is part of that, but that we should be okay. So what new information is coming in, or what are you hearing? I guess this is our opportunity to get the inside track, right?
Sure. I mean, they're gonna be presenting their case a little bit later on, the science table, not their case, but their findings and their experience in analyzing the Omicron variant compared to the Delta and the other waves that we've experienced. My takeaways from the presentation yesterday is that Omicron doubles every 2.2 days. And it is becoming the dominant variant. It has become the dominant variant. So I believe the number today was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 cases. And I think about 1,800 of those are Omicron. And so if you believe the numbers that the science table is putting out there and the modeling that they've placed in front of us, those 1,800 Omicron cases by the end of the weekend are going to potentially be 36 or 3,600. Plus, you still have Delta hanging around. So this is a very, very transmissible variant of COVID. Typically, when you look at the previous waves, the chart sort of goes like this, and the cases are going up. I hope everybody can see me. And then you hit the plateau, and then you come back down. When we saw what's happened in South Africa and other countries that we compare ourselves to in Europe, this was the trajectory. It's like, it's a hockey stick. It's straight up. And so we're going to see those cases double. So people that are vaxxed obviously have more protection than those are unvaxxed. And we haven't necessarily seen the hospitalizations from this variant, but they haven't quite pinpointed whether or not this is as serious or less serious than Delta as far as hospitalizations and ICU visits go. They're still waiting for that information to come forward, but they did modeling as if it was the same as Delta, and then they also did some modeling at about 25% the potency or virulence of Delta. And
Can I ask a question? Sorry, about talk about vaccinations, but anybody who's been trying to book vaccinations, there's no availability in our region. Like you can go online, you can book for Coburg, for Lindsay, but why does Hastings Prince Edward not have any available appointments? Because for people wanting to let employees go to get their booster shots, they're going to have to travel for a couple of hours. We need more vaccines in our region for sure.
So let me just finish the thought on the vaccine efficacy, and then I'll answer that question, Suzanne. It's a good one, and we certainly get that a lot here at the office. The other thing that the science table showed was that as you get into month 5 and 6 of your second dose, right? So I had my second dose on Canada Day. So I'm now getting into month 5 and 6. The efficacy starts to wane a little bit in those later months. So that's why getting the boosters in arms is so important. And that's why there seems to be this call for arms and call to arms to get arms out there to get vaccines in arms and get arms out there to get vaccines in. To your question, Suzanne, it all comes down to supply. So our area, when those vaccines become available, and I just talked to Dr. Tumache, our local medical officer of health, those appointments are gone in minutes. As soon as they go up, and as soon as he knows how many vaccines he's going to get, they're gone. And so for whatever reason, there seem to be vaccine appointments available in Coburg. I just went online this morning, like many people did, and the only options I had this morning were Coburg. I'm okay. I got a car. I drive by Coburg 2 or 3 times a day, so I can stop in and get my shot if I want to in Coburg. But his advice to me and my advice to our cabinet and to those who are running the vaccine program is, we as Hastings and Prince Edward, and you can even look east to Kingston, we're the hot areas right now. You'll recall we made sacrifices, back in the day when the GTA was on fire, to distribute 25% of our vaccine, or the new vaccine that was coming in, to those hot areas. I think now there's an opportunity for those folks to repay the favor. We have an older population here. We are potentially more vulnerable here. We have about the same rate of vaccination. It depends on which health unit you're in, but there's an opportunity here, and it all comes down to supply. We just don't know. He doesn't know. We don't know as the Ministry of Health when we're actually going to get the supply from the federal government. The federal government says it's coming. They've put all the vaccines on order, but it's very difficult for the Hastings and Prince Edward Public Health Unit to make vaccine appointments available if they don't know that the vaccine is coming or when it's coming. Because the worst thing you can do is have a bunch of us on this screen sign up for our vaccine, and you show up and they say, oh, sorry, the vaccine didn't arrive yet. So it's all part of supply management and making sure that you're not raising expectations when you don't know if you're getting the supply that you need.
Okay, and so just as a quick follow-up, do you feel then that our health region is getting our fair share of vaccines and they're just going faster? Because it just seems like throughout all of this pandemic, we've never had appointments available. I live in Quinte West. I haven't been able to get anything in Quinte West. So I don't mind driving to Belleville or Picton, but going up to Lindsay and other places, it gets very difficult. So if you're saying we're getting our fair share, we'll have to take it at that. But certainly we'd love to see other people give us some extra vaccine. That would be
Yeah, no, and I've made the case. I think they are being distributed equitably according to population numbers. I think at this time, because of the high number of cases that we have in Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox and Addington, and Hastings and Prince Edward, what I'm pushing for right now is a little extra love. If we can get some extra vaccines into this area, because we were so gracious in trying to put out the fire earlier in the waves, you know, it's time to pay us back for our goodwill earlier in the pandemic.
Very good. The one question I'm going to throw out there, and then I'm going to maybe pass it over to Suzanne to talk a little bit about manufacturing supply chain stuff. And these are kind of overarching issues that we've heard back on that we know that your government has been dealing with or considering. So I'm hoping that you can give us more of an update. The one thing we don't really want to try and focus on today is putting you on the spot to make a commitment moving forward because we don't know what the future holds. But what's going on with the childcare thing and the $10 a day childcare?
Yep, yeah, good question. And so all of the provinces now, besides Ontario, and there's a couple of territories that haven't come to the agreement yet for the $10 a day daycare that the federal government is proposing. You know, right from the start when this program came out, our government and our minister didn't feel like Ontario was getting its fair share of the funding in this program, and there was no way, if we accepted the deal as it stood, that we would even get close to $10 a day daycare. So the negotiations have been ongoing. Minister Lecce is obviously our minister responsible for childcare, as the education minister, and Karina Gould is the federal minister. She's from Burlington. And so they've been having conversations now for the last number of weeks. There is a realization, I believe, that Ontario was getting shortchanged. I mean, it would not be fair for people in Ontario, moms and dads in Ontario, to say, okay, we'll take the deal that you're giving us. People in Alberta are getting $10 a day daycare, and people in New Brunswick are getting $10 a day daycare. But we're only, because of the deal that we signed, able to get $25 a day daycare, or whatever it would have worked out to have been. So there seems to be an acknowledgement by the federal government that, okay, we do need to treat Ontario a little bit differently than maybe the original deal was intended to do, because we're not going to be able, we've made the case that we're not going to be able to hit the federal government's target of $10 a day. So those negotiations are going on. You know, we have the all-day kindergarten that was introduced a number of years ago, and it's a $3.6 billion program that wasn't considered by the federal government. The federal government also, over the years, and they're trying to address this, I'll give them full credit, have only ever contributed 2.5% of the child care dollars in Ontario. The rest has been picked up by the provincial government and municipalities. And we also have a bit of a unique system here in Ontario, and the fact that we have a mix of providers, right? We have private daycares, we have public daycare spaces, we have not-for-profit. So the vast majority that we have, I see Debbie on there, and she's been a strong advocate for more childcare spaces in the region, and certainly this is what we're trying to accomplish. You know, building 30,000 new spots. We have to build more to meet the demand, but we have to ensure that it's sustainable. And while Debbie's organization does a fabulous job at making sure our kids have a safe place to go, we want to make sure that we've got a deal that's going to work for all parents in Ontario. And just the fact that there is that negotiation that's continuing, we're going to get there. I think we're going to get there. It's just a matter of when, and we want to get the right deal for moms and dads in Ontario.
Okay, Suzanne, do you want to jump on the manufacturing part?
Sure. So I think, Minister, there's obviously here in the Quinte region, we've got a strong manufacturing base. Some of them have been able to get some funding. I know Mike's on from Kinsip. He talked about a grant that they were using that they were hoping was going to be extended. So sort of what support is out there for manufacturers who now, because of COVID, they're dealing with the high input costs from inflation. Supply chain is becoming a huge issue. The costs of transportation, the logistics. I know a lot of this falls into the federal realm of control, but what is the province doing to ensure that our manufacturers can continue to create jobs and provide goods for our province?
Sure. One of the biggest issues that I hear from folks in the manufacturing sector is access to labor as well, right? So trying to make sure that we can fill those labor gaps where possible through things like Second Career and the other programs that I mentioned earlier. As the Minister of Energy, I can tell you one of the biggest concerns that I've been hearing, not as the Minister of Energy, but previously as the critic, was certainly the high cost and soaring cost of electricity. So we've really provided some stability through our comprehensive energy plan and what we call the renewable cost shift, which actually takes that global adjustment cost, a portion of that global adjustment cost that manufacturers were paying, shifts it to the tax base. So it's not on bills anymore. What it means is Class A and Class B customers out there, and it gets a bit complicated for those who aren't in manufacturing, but it's providing a savings of 15 to 17% per year. And I'll tell you, as Minister of Economic Development there for almost a year back in 2018-19, and traveling literally around the world and trying to sell Ontario as a great place for investment and sustaining and growing jobs in the province. I would go to someplace in Ohio and in the Cleveland area and talk to a manufacturer and say, you should be setting up in Ontario. Or I would go to India and I would say, in Mumbai, we have a perfect destination for you to put a Tata auto plant, and we've got the land for you. And the first thing that comes out of these potential investors' mouths is, why are your electricity prices so high, and why is your system so complex? So we've been spending a lot of time over the last 3 years trying to simplify that and provide some stability and certainty. So through programs like the Comprehensive Energy Plan and the Renewable Cost Shift and the Ontario Electricity Rebate and other programs, we are now competitive with most of our neighboring jurisdictions when it comes to the industrial cost of electricity. I was on a similar call to this, all manufacturers on the line the other day, and one of the gentlemen said, I asked the question, what is this actually saving you? All of these measures we put in place, and he said $2.2 million a year in electricity costs. So all of these moves together are saving businesses money. And then we had the Ontario support program. We had the WSIB changes. Vic Fideli talks about those changes all the time. And there are a number of other different programs. But our goal is to make Ontario the economic giant again of Canada and actually of North America. The Premier is really vociferous on this and making sure that everybody knows that this is the best place to manufacture everything, right? He said to me the other night, he said, Smitty, Kentucky might be known for manufacturing this, and New Jersey may be known for manufacturing that, and Ohio may be known for manufacturing this. We manufacture everything in Ontario. And, and I think the perfect example of how nimble and effective to meeting demand that our manufacturers are here in Ontario. The way they stood up new companies in the start of the pandemic, when we had PPE shortages, when we had to build our own ventilators. I mean, I was talking to General Electric the other day, and we now have more ventilators than we know what to do with in Ontario. And that's a good thing, by the way, because we don't want to be using those. But just the way they stood up that line, guys like Michael at Kinsip, switching from making that lovely rum to making hand sanitizers. and so many other companies that started to push out PPE, the masks and the gowns and the shields and all of those things. We can manufacture anything here in Ontario, and in most cases we are manufacturing it.
So maybe before we get off manufacturing, because I know we've got other sectors we want to cover. I know at the beginning of the mandate for the government, they talked about the red tape reduction. And I mean, that affects all sectors, but especially manufacturers, they deal with a lot of red tape. How is your government doing with that? I know you had set some pretty high goals to reduce red tape. Has COVID made that easier, or are you finding that some of that those initiatives have stalled?
No, it's still happening. It's no longer my responsibility. But I did provide a couple of pieces into the red tape bill that just passed a couple of weeks ago in the legislature. Nina Tangri is our small business minister. Jill, you had the opportunity to meet Nina earlier this summer when she was here in Belleville for a tour through the downtown and helped open a new business with the chamber. And
we got her cutting red tape.
Yes, we were literally cutting a red tape as we opened that business. That's right. Yeah. And Nina's done a fantastic job at continuing to bring forward red tape reduction bills. So supporting small businesses and people was the bill that just passed in the legislature. It had, I think, 27 different pieces in that. I had a couple from the energy file, but they were wide ranging. From environmental change to that would impact manufacturers to the one I put forward was introducing something called Green Button across the province. This is a data standard that all of the local distribution companies, Hydro One and Electra and Alexicon and all of those LDCs will have to implement Green Button data. And what it will allow you to do when it's fully implemented is to take full control of your own energy bill. So your electricity bill and your natural gas bill, if you have natural gas, you'll be able to reduce or increase the output of your refrigerator or your stove or your heating unit from the palm of your hand, whether you're on the beach in Mexico, which all of us wish we were at right now, or at the rink with your kids, or at your office. And early estimates on that is that it will save up to 18% on your electricity bill each year. So that's just another. That's not necessarily red tape reduction, but it's streamlining the way the province deals with the data around LDCs and making sure that these companies that build these apps can get you these apps in your hands so you can take control of your energy bill. So to answer your question, there's been 4 or 5 different red tape bills that have gone through. Our goal back in the day was to reduce red tape by 25% and save businesses millions and millions of dollars. And I think most of them are accomplishing that, and they're still working at it. So I mean, if you're dealing with red tape in your business, duplication of any kind, reach out to my office. We'll stick it in the next red tape bill, as long as it actually is red tape and duplication and unnecessary.
For us, it's been incredible. We now do a quarter of the filings that we used to. It's made a big difference.
Yeah. That's really great to hear. And maybe I could reach out to your office, Todd, and look at getting maybe a report card and a summary of some of those measures that have been done, because it sounds like you've been doing a lot, and maybe a lot of businesses aren't aware of some of those reductions that have been done. So I'll follow up with you after. Yeah,
I won't mention that other organization, but they do a report card, and I have it in my office. When I was the minister, I got an A-, which was the highest in the country, and it's the only time I ever got an A. I can tell you that.
We have so Spencer Call is here. He's been standing. If he were having his arm up as long as he has, I think he's about ready to fall off. So Spencer, you gave me 2 really good questions. I love the way you worded them. If you don't mind, go ahead.
Yeah, so 2 questions. First, as Energy Minister, so you mentioned you're going around the world to advocate for Ontario. Are you advocating that Ontario is one of the cleanest energy grids on the planet? For example, just this morning, Ontario produced 29 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, but sunny California, for all its green fanfare, was producing 302 grams per kilowatt hour. And a lot of areas of the world are seeing huge price spikes because of fossil fuels, whereas Ontario is extremely stable because of nuclear and hydro. So are you advocating for those positives of Ontario? And the second being for the housing issue, are you advocating for cities to increase density? So for example, in Belleville here, to find an R5 zoning, which is a multi-unit complexes to an affordable housing for people. It's very hard to find it on the zoning map here. So are you advocating for municipalities to look at their zoning to create that more affordable housing so builders can actually build those places?
Yeah, thanks for the questions. And for the preamble on your first question, Spencer, I would take you on the road with me anytime because we do have a very, very green grid here in Ontario, and it is one of the things that we're able to sell around the world. It's been really interesting over the last couple of years. Just the ESG mandate, the environmental social governance mandates that different companies have, where they've made a commitment to only using green power in the production of their product, whatever it might be. So if it's an auto manufacturer, they may only want to use green steel, which means made from electricity, green electricity. So we've got some really neat developments that we're working on in the Ministry of Energy to ensure that those companies can get that direct stream of green energy. And you're right, largely our green system, the backbone of it or the foundation of it is our nuclear system, providing over 60% of our electricity every day. The hydroelectric fleet that we have, the run of river, is about 20 to 25%. So that gets you to 85% of our grid right there. Sprinkle in some renewables, some wind power, some solar power, and then balance that out with some biomass and some natural gas, and you have the Ontario grid, which is fairly diverse. I don't know how many of you saw yesterday, but I had an amazing announcement. I thought it was amazing. We had an announcement in Cambridge at a company called BWXT. They're part of the nuclear supply chain here in Ontario. And a few weeks back, we announced that we were moving forward with the first new nuclear build in Ontario since 1993. It's a small modular reactor, a 300 megawatt project. GE Hitachi is the company that's going to build this on site at Darlington. And yesterday, 2 weeks later than that original announcement, we had a delegation from Poland in Cambridge. Poland relies on coal, and they rely on Russian natural gas, which they don't like very much in Poland. It's very, very, very expensive. And so there's a lot of emissions coming from Poland. They announced yesterday that they're buying 10 of the small modular reactors that we're going to be building in Darlington. And the pieces, the parts for this small modular reactor, many of them are going to be produced at BWXT in Cambridge. It was $1 billion announcement, 1 billion in parts that are going to be built in Cambridge. We have a number of companies in the Quinte region, mostly just outside the Quinte region, that are part of that nuclear supply chain. There's about 220, but we have the best nuclear supply chain in the world, and we have the safest technology in the world. We have the best regulatory regime in the world, and the world is watching. And I am the top salesman for nuclear in the world right now because we want them to buy the product here in Ontario and then export it around the world. So 10 were purchased by this conglomerate out of Poland yesterday, and the memorandum of understanding was signed. On the housing density side, yeah, certainly it's a big part of what Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Steve Clark, has been talking about. In the GTA, what we're talking about is transit-oriented communities, building up around the transit hubs. And as far as smaller communities go, I think we're still seeing a lot of the traditional single-family homes being built, but there is a movement to try and increase intensification and density in in home building in the future. We need more homes. We value very much the land that we have, and we want to make sure that we're using it as efficiently and effectively as we possibly can. And bringing in pro-growth legislation. Minister Clark has brought forward 7 pieces of legislation to deal with housing. It's not something you're going to fix overnight. It takes a while to get the housing built to where you need it, but intensification certainly is a part of that. We're building community housing, supportive housing. We're building rental housing for the first time since the 1990s. We're actually seeing new rental units being built. And you know, part of that is because of the different legislation that we've brought in to encourage developers to build rental, because for the longest time, nobody wanted to touch the rental market because it was just so unstable. So there's a lot happening on that front. I think if you talk to our municipal colleagues, our mayors and councillors, and I see Councillor Hirsch on there, you know, one of the big issues that they're dealing with, if not the biggest issue, is housing. So we need more of it. We need to build it smart and make the best use of the land that we have.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer.
Really quickly, because it came up in a supply chain conversation we had before you arrived, and how expensive it has become to bring a shipping container in. But also we have from the other side of that is that if a contractor has, you know, bid on a job, now all of a sudden the rising material costs are impacting their ability. Do you foresee the provincial government supporting this in some way, either from the supply chain, the logistics side, the transportation side, or even supporting someone who's kind of tied to a contract and now has to try and live up to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I don't know what role, if anybody has any advice on what role the provincial government could potentially play in that. Certainly, you know, one of the challenges that we're dealing with, and I think, you know, folks that are in the manufacturing sector or part of the supply chain understand, is this whole Buy American piece, which isn't helping. You know, and we're trying to put as much pressure as we can on our American colleagues. You know, Ontario is a huge trading partner to the United States, and so when I was Minister of Economic Development, I'd constantly be talking to different governors in different states, because back then it was Trump that was doing the Buy American stuff and pounding the table and talking about Buy American. Now Joe Biden's doing the exact same thing, and it's almost worse. You almost can't seem to get through to them at all about how important it is for their economy and for our economy to ensure that we don't have these protectionist type of moves. So, you know, back in the days of Trump, when I was economic development minister, we brought in some very, very targeted sanctions against various states. So if you were a state that was known for your pickles, we weren't going to be buying your pickles anymore. And when you call the governor or the congressman or the state representative and tell them, look, Ontario is your biggest trading partner, we're not buying your pickles anymore, it starts to get through to the White House that maybe some of these protectionist measures that they're putting in place aren't working. So we might have to start to ramp some of that stuff up again. As far as the inflation goes, you know, it's just such, it's so I'm not sure what we can do as far as a monetary policy at the provincial level that would have much of an impact on that. And you know, as far as the cost of container ships, and I know it's just an incredible challenge, and manufacturers are facing you know, enormous costs in getting their goods here. You know, the thing that, and this was a conversation that the Premier and I had the other night actually with a colleague, was, you know, as much as we can make stuff here in Ontario, let's make it here in Ontario so we don't have to worry about it, right? It's almost kind of a protectionist measure in its own right, but we do have the ability to stand this up, and if we can avoid you know, importing goods, it does give us that advantage. But that's what the U.S. is doing, so it's a chicken and egg kind of a scenario. If anybody has any ideas, bring them on.
I have one sort of kind of idea that's a little micro idea and is a little bit of a follow-up in from my earlier question about taxation and alcohol. It's been noted to me in the chat that there is nothing in the announcement about domestic wine and alcohol sales, and that it's about import. So I'm not sure if there's a detail being overlooked there. But I think, one thing we've talked a lot about is interprovincial trade barriers and taxation with beverage alcohol, because in Prince Edward County, we do represent all 4 beverage alcohol sectors. So I think that would be one way we could beef up Ontario or liquefy Ontario.
Yeah, on that issue, we before we rolled out the restaurant program, we did speak with Ontario craft wineries and the 2 groups. There's 2 major groups: the Ontario craft wineries and then WAGO is the other one. They did not want to be a part of that program. They believe that it benefits them not to be a part of that program. And I can't recall all of the reasons why, but I believe if you did reach out to somebody on the Wine Council, they would be able to explain to you exactly why it wasn't going to benefit them.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah. Because that was the first thing I saw too, Leslie, when I saw it. I said, okay, let me ask why this doesn't include Ontario craft wineries. But at the end of the day, I was assured by the minister that they had done the outreach and that this.
Yeah, it's surprising just for how much advocacy we've done on this. So
what they want is what Michael wants, and certainly that 6.1% tax is still something that we're hounding the Ministry of Finance about every day. And I think honestly, it would just unleash economic opportunity in rural Ontario. We had our own alcohol guru, Ken Hughes, who did a report. It was the first year we were government, just looking at beverage alcohol and what an opportunity, where the opportunities were in Ontario. And the number one thing that he said was the biggest area that you can grow economic development in rural Ontario is in the beverage alcohol sector. You just have to trim a little bit and as far as tax goes, but you'll get that much more back in return. So trying to convince the Ministry of Finance that their own alcohol guru is right has been my one of my mandates over the last 3 years. So.
Love government. And I think I just have a tiny little question too that was discussed earlier that since I have the floor and is directly relevant to Prince Edward County in all of this energy talk, we only have 1 electric charging station in Prince Edward County for cars. And I know with Councillor Hirsch on the line and that, I'm not sure of the details of how or why that is. But if you can do anything, Todd, to get us some more charging stations on our giant landmass called Prince Edward County, it would be really helpful, not only for locals, but also our visitors here.
Yeah, I made an announcement. The provincial announcement was a couple of weeks ago, and we did it at an en route north of Toronto in King Vaughan. And so we signed an agreement, the government did, with the Ivy Charging Network, which is a company that's made up of OPG and Hydro One. These are the fast charging stations, and also the en routes and Canadian Tire. And so all 23 en routes in the province are going to have these fast charging stations installed over the next couple of years, which will be very helpful to people coming to visit Bay of Quinte, because these charging stations are going to be right there on the en route. The first ones that are going to be installed, Trenton North and Trenton South. So I said, here's your opportunity to come visit the Bay of Quinte, right? And so they're going to be installed actually in January and February. They're the first 2 that are going to be installed. So I look forward to having Suzanne out and some others from Quinte West to celebrate these first 2 charging stations that are going in. These are going to be fast chargers. You can go in for 15 minutes, plug in, put your credit card in, plug in, and it's probably going to cost you about $7 to get your charge. Depending on the vehicle you have, it'll get you about 200 kilometers of range. And so that'll get you through the county, and then you can stop on the en route on the way back out and charge again before you head back to Toronto. So it just made a lot of sense to put them at the en routes because of the convenience. Those en routes that have been renovated are actually quite comfortable and quite nice. There's still a couple of them that need to be renovated, so they're not going to get their charging stations, of course, until after the renovations are done. But those two in Trenton are newly renovated. Very comfortable for people. They can go in, use the restrooms, grab a coffee, and by the time they're done that, their car is charged and they can head back out on the highway.
I look forward to the second two in Prince Edward County.
And if you do want the fast charging stations, you know, they are available through the Ivy Charging Network. You can actually purchase them from this company. Now, the fast chargers are a little more expensive, but you know, in a place that thinks outside the box like Prince Edward County, you could sell some advertising around the charging station that would pay for it, right? And you could stick it wherever you wanted it.
There is my revenue diversification idea for 2022. Consider it bought. Right, Michael? Can I plant it at Kinsip?
More EVs our way, for sure.
Well, we've made a real commitment to EV development. You know, back when I was the economic development minister, we brought forward a program called Driving Prosperity, which was aimed at making sure that we had an auto sector going forward. Because, you know, in the first week that I was on the job, General Motors announced that it was leaving Oshawa. I don't think it was because of me, but they announced that they were leaving Oshawa, and it became really evident that we needed to put something together to ensure that we had those OEMs here in the province. They're so important because there's so many companies down the supply chain that are located in the Quinte region and all over the province. So what we've seen as a result of Driving Prosperity and working with the Auto Parts Manufacturers Association on that is a real investment from those OEMs. So Ford has invested over $1 billion in an EV platform. GM has done the same, 1.6 billion. Stellantis, which is the former Fiat Chrysler, they've made that kind of investment to build electric vehicles there too. So we anticipate we'll be building 400,000 electric vehicles a year in the next couple of years in Ontario, and then all of the EVs that are imported as well. So at the Ministry of Energy, it's probably one of the things that makes me most nervous is if we're selling that many EVs. Keep in mind, we have about 67,000 EVs in the province right now. If we're selling hundreds of thousands of EVs, we have to make sure that we have the infrastructure, and it's going to take more than 2 EV stations in Prince Edward County to charge all of those stations. And it's also going to require us to have more generation of electricity. And Pickering Nuclear is coming offline in the next 4 years, three and a bit, and they produce 3,000 megawatts there. So we have to replace that and then some with reliable forms of electricity, because you can't power stuff with wind and solar unless you have the battery storage, and then it starts to get a little more expensive. Anyway, that's a whole other story.
Brilliant, thank you.
And so I think we have you for about 5 more minutes, Minister. Really good question here about the dairy board, actually. I don't know if you have anything to say about the price of milk or liquid dairy. We are keeping track of all of the questions in the chat. We will reach out, and I might even put a few of you together in small groups over the course of the next few weeks to kind of pull together some of the problems so we can get a really good background document together and maybe some recommendations around that will move forward. But so I'll leave it with you, Todd, anything, or Suzanne or Leslie, if you have anything else to say. Thanks for all of you for joining us today. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, best of the season, find some joy, hopefully hug a loved one in your bubble, and have a great time. Thank you. I'll leave it with you guys.
Sure. I would just say in closing, thanks to the Belleville Chamber, thanks to the Quinte West Chamber, thanks to Prince Edward County. You guys are such great advocates, honestly, for the business community. It's great for me to come on a couple times a year and do these types of forums. You're doing it every day. It's important for me to hear from the business community as to what's important to them, because certainly we want to ensure that, as I say, when we get through this pandemic, and want to make sure you have the supports that you need throughout the pandemic, but when we get out of this, I fully intend to see those roaring 2020s. And the economy is really going to take off. So my office is always here, ready to take advice or ideas and help out with any issues that you may have. But really want to thank the Chamber for all of your advocacy, and thanks for asking me not to sing today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And on behalf of the Quinte West business community, certainly your staff that you have in your office, the two that I deal with most is Jennifer and David. I've been great to work with, very conscious of our community and how they can offer the support. And I know listening to businesses, there's many businesses that are doing very well and others that are still continuing to struggle. And this pandemic has not affected all businesses equally. And so I know there's businesses that are hoping there's going to be support there for those that are maybe going to fall through the cracks of the federal announcements. I know that we're waiting for that to get finalized, but it looks like there is going to be some support for businesses in hard-hit sectors, the tourism, hospitality. And they've also got like a local lockdown support for if just your local area gets locked down. But there could be businesses that fall through the cracks. And certainly I know that the grant that the provincial government put out, there was 2 payments that went out, was hugely successful, and businesses are so grateful for those supports, and they really have made a difference in how many businesses have been able to stay alive through this. And I would hope that certainly if it's needed, that the government will find a way to support businesses in the new year as this pandemic drags on a lot longer than any of us originally anticipated. So
yeah, thanks, Suzanne. Appreciate that. And just to reinforce what a great advocate Suzanne is in Quinte West, my former staffer Ashley Harnden, who many of you might remember, she was on a call yesterday. She now works for the Auto Parts Manufacturers Association in Toronto, and she was on a federal call yesterday. And the very first question that came was from Suzanne Andrews in Quinte West. So it made her feel right at home. So good going, Suzanne. Keep up the advocacy, not just at the provincial level, but at the federal level too. If that's it, Merry Christmas, everybody. Let's get through this latest wave, and look forward to spending some time with my family over the next week or so. I get to see Tanya once in a while, and Peyton and Reagan even less, but really look forward to spending some time with my family. I'm sure you all do as well, and make the most of your time together, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thanks again. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone. We'll have the recording available soon.